Not sure if that was Norwich City or vintage Brazil at points during that. Welcome to this week's edition of the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, brought to you in association with Coleman's of Norwich, which is apt because Norwich City certainly cut the mustard this afternoon at Carrow Road. They've recorded a statement win, a 2-0 win over West Brom. And I think for maybe the first time in a little while, smiles on faces, loud voices. It was a really enjoyable afternoon at Carrow Road. Paddy, I said in my verdict, that felt like a moment. And we've maybe had a few of those, but I'm not sure we've quite had one as emphatic as that. It's the first time in 16 months that Norwich City have beaten a team that have started the day inside the top six. 2 defeats now in 12. I mean, it feels like something is, I'm not quite sure what it is, but it feels like something is gathering and building at the moment. And maybe it is just one of these streaks that we've talked about, but maybe it's hope that is making us cling on to the fact that it could be something greater. But certainly today was a good day to be at Carrow Road.
It was very good performance and result against a good side. And, you know, the fact that they've lost tonight and they're still fifth in the table tells you they are a good side. And, you know, a team who have now clearly the same ambitions as Norwich, which is to be in that top six come the end of the season. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it in due course, but I look at that today and I look at that 7 or 8 game block at the start of the season when they were flying unbeaten, second to Leicester in the early standings. And those two were mirror images for me. And what's gone on in between for various reasons, injuries and this sense that the head coach wasn't clearly getting the best out of the available resource. That is all true and of its time, and we've discussed that in due course. But given their due tonight, you know, they can reflect on composed and clinical because they really played with West Brom and West Brom played into their hands. They just let them have the possession, which we know under Corbrand they like to do, but can't really recall Angus Gunn having too much to do. There was a couple of catches from DK headers that he had to pouch. They had a couple of good opportunities straight after the interval, pulled them wide of the far post and then one of the near post. But they really played into Norwich's hands today. And that's credit to Wagner as well, tactically, which is a charge that's been laid at his door throughout this season. But today, I thought they got it spot on. And the players executed it perfectly as well, and like I say, one clinical moment first half, one second half, and the job was done. And I don't think it's a coincidence that to underline my point about that for me was one you could have picked up and dropped into the first 8 games of the season. Josh Sargent's now back. He is without doubt the talisman for this group in terms of what Wagner wants to do, how he wants to set up, what he's trying to do out of possession with a high press, what he's trying to do in possession in terms of transition moments. Both those goals came from transition moments, but the first one, his goal today, runs into the channel, stretching the play, and the service has to be right, and it was for Kenny McLean. He is, for me, the difference maker. Where Norwich are now and where they were 7 defeats in 9, even that blip over the festive period with 2 defeats back-to-back, he is the difference. And you know, I wrote about it, my point is we can rightly relish what we've seen today at Carrow, but how different would the mood have been and the vibe around this group, this football club, the fan base, if they'd managed to keep him fit? And I know that's ifs, buts and maybes, but he's 5 goals in 8 games now. He's only played 8 championship games and he's got 5 goals. Can you imagine if he'd have stayed relatively healthy, what he would have done in the intervening 3 months, and consequently when Norwich, I've absolutely no doubt whatsoever, if he'd have stayed fit, they wouldn't be as they are now, 8th in the table, 2 points outside, 4 points behind West Brom in 5th. I think they'd have been in that bracket of Leicester, Leeds, Ipswich and Southampton. So for me, what we saw today is hopefully, if we can keep Sargent fit, is a potential end to the season that is far more in keeping with how they started the season. Now, whether, as David himself said post-match, whether that's good enough to take them where they want to go to in the top 6, it's probably out of their hands to a degree. But I certainly think, and again, today was, for me, evidence of it. If that group of players can be kept together, then they will be right in that conversation for the top 6 between now and the end of the season, albeit because of what's happened in the intervening period, you're probably only realistically looking at 5th and 6th. I think the top 4 have gone in terms of overhauling them unless one of them has a major collapse. So you're now in a race with quite a clutch of clubs for maybe 2 playoff spots. But make no mistake, they are in that race because today they've underlined that they have the personnel and they can be, in terms of the coaching aspect, put together in a fashion to be justifiably, deservedly winners over a very good West Brom team.
Contenders, that's the word that David Wagner used post-match, and I think it's hard to disagree with that. Just on Sargent, there's a good tweet from Bethnal Yellow and Green, who does some fan columns for us, which are always good reads. And I'll just make this point. It's 5 goals from 14 shots this season, and from an expected goals rate of 3.25. It's the first time that he's really managed to over kind of achieve his expected goals, which proves basically that your finishing is really good or you're quite lucky. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is that his finishing is quite good. I realised in my intro and perhaps the giddiness of everything that's happened today, I didn't introduce everybody. So I'm Connor Southwell, of course, Paddy and Adam Harvey with me to dissect that, as you've just heard Paddy's Sean Dyche tones as ever, which is good. Adam, contenders, that's the word, as I said, David Wagner used. It's now 7 points from a block of games that involved Southampton, and like I said, I think we were pretty critical of the approach, and I think I'd probably stand by a lot of what we said around that, but the fact of the matter is that they got a point there. Hull, likewise, a lot of the debate about stylistics and the way that they got 3 points, but a win there. Win today, I don't think anyone will be complaining about the fashion that they did it, and we'll delve into the performance in just a moment. But as a block of games, to take 7 points from those 9 against teams who are above them in the table as it stands, it's a really impressive haul from Norwich City, isn't it?
Yeah, I said that to Paddy actually after the game. You factor in now, they've played Southampton twice, they've played Hull twice, they've played West Brom twice, they'll be playing Leeds for the second time on Wednesday night. That's pretty much 4 of sides that are going to be in and around the top 6 come the end of the season, and that then looks a little bit more favourable, and 3 defeats in 15, 2 in the last 12 in all competitions. It's, suddenly what this kind of streaky runs of form, it feels like this is maybe a little bit more sustainable now. They feel like they've kind of almost turned that corner a little bit, and it's quite nice to feel a little bit more positive around kind of the way it's sort of moving now in terms of the direction. And yeah, I think now the Leeds game, there's a little bit less pressure on that. They've kind of got the win today. They're 3 points further ahead than maybe what a lot of fans maybe would have felt maybe before the game today. West Brom are a good side, and they're 5th in the table for a reason. So I think now you those 2 games over Christmas have almost been forgotten about again. The sort of defeat at West Brom and the defeat at Millwall, because they're now starting to pick up the points again. And if they can maintain that come the end of the season, then they're going to be right amongst it. And therefore, David Wagner's right to label them as contenders, because if they can maintain it, as I just said, they will be there. So it's good moving forwards, and it's good to sort of see Carrow Road bouncing a little bit again today after the game. Again, it's felt like quite a while, irrespective of maybe the wins against Huddersfield or Sheffield Wednesday. Those kind of maybe had mitigation around performances, or fans maybe didn't feel they could sort of reach the levels they could do, where today felt like a team that was back playing the football they want to play. They felt confident, and they got the job done, and 3 points on the board.
I remember I think it might have been after the Southampton pod, and maybe even one more recently than that, might have even been Bristol Rovers, and say I can't remember a point in time when Norwich City had played that well over a 90-minute piece. I think today is one that you would say that they absolutely did do that. They did perform in the way, and actually, I mean, you referenced it there, and I think I said before kickoff that that game, maybe barring Science of Fashion Act, is pretty much what we saw at Huddersfield when they won 4-0. So is there just an element now of perhaps what David Wagner said all along in terms of injuries, in terms of the mitigation that we've seen down the track? Because certainly this starting 11, irrespective of maybe what you think of the squad depth and other factors, that starting 11 and what is delivered today, I mean, that proves that it's, when it plays like that and when it shows the balance in terms of performance like that, it is among the best teams in the division.
Well, certainly in the best 6 teams in the division, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, we can't absolve Wagner or the players who were fit and available during that 9-10 games into basically Cardiff. Really, it's not enough just to say, well, you lost Josh Sargent, to a lesser extent you lost Ashley Barnes, and they wasn't able to keep the ship on the road. And we said that at the time. I distinctly recall when Sargent, when it was diagnosed that he was going to be out for a 3-month period, I think we basically said, well, the challenge now to Adam Eder, to Hwang as it was then, to Barnes prior to him getting injured against Leicester, was almost a holding pattern job to keep Norwich in and around it. And you'd have to be honest and say they'd probably just fall in. If you define in and around it's 12th and 13th as they were around Millwall, then I'd say no, they failed in that objective, and so now they're having to make up ground with him back, with Barnes back as well, and what they do as a combination. So we're not. I don't think we can now sit here and rewrite off the back of today is unquestionably a very good performance, and as Adam pointed out there, and I'm surprised at that it is 2 defeats in all competitions in 12 now. So that is a sustained body of positive results, irrespective of whether the performances have matched the results. But you can't question that is a sufficiently big sample to suggest that there is something now that feels good enough to keep them in the conversation, which is where we all hoped they would be. But you can't shed the 3 months that went before. 7 defeats in 9, irrespective of who was fit and who was available. That was below par, below the expectations of that head coach, that group of players, that fan base. But as we've said quite often recently, in a championship, which I think bar the top 4 is very average this season, that prolonged fallow period hasn't proved terminal, and it's proven to be the case that now they've manoeuvred themselves into a position where they are very firmly in with the Hulls, in with the Coventrys, in with the Sunderland, Middlesbrough, Watford, and West Brom now, scrapping for maybe two playoff spots. And I guess it's the golfing analogy. There's no pictures on the scorecard. It's just what the score is at the end of the round. And I think if they get into the top 6 come May, we won't look too harshly or judge the people involved too harshly that they lost 7 in 9 before Christmas, and there was weekly calls for David Wagner's head, and a feeling that this group of players were not performing to their optimum. All of that will flow under and be viewed then through, well, no, hang on, when push came to shove, they did get it together and they did finish in the top 6, and then it's for people to judge if that by itself is par, or whether they should be doing better when they get in the playoffs. But it's probably best now to not sort of look too introspectively and keep pivoting back to what's gone before. Now the reality is now this group of players are very firmly in the race for promotion, and moving forward now, starting with Leeds, which is a very good test ahead. Let's see what they can do over the remainder. They've certainly got themselves back in position by this little post-festive spurt of results. But what's different today for me from all the recent results, good, bad or indifferent, is the performance. The performance today was of a controlled manner, in and out of possession, with all the elements that you need to stitch together in terms of defensive resolution, that clean sheet, very good across the middle of the park, where you have to be against West Brom because that's their strength, and at the top end of the pitch, whether it's a Sargent, whether it's a Johnny Rowe, less so Barnes and Science, but I'm sure that they have the potential to weigh in as we go. They have a real punch to their efforts now going forward, and it was all encapsulated for me, that performance, in one move. Not even the goal moves. There was a move around about 31 minutes where it started with Ben Gibson in the left hand side of the Norwich area. When Yanulis, I think Kenny McLean was involved, Zara, I think Barnes, on, and it ended with one of those 2 chances for John Rowe, and the manner that they, through precision, worked their way through the thirds, that was very reminiscent of that Huddersfield away win, Southampton when they drew that day, and Millwall at home. Basically that purple patch at the start of August. And when that move, albeit it didn't end in a goal, when that move fizzled out and play resumed, you just thought, yes, that's what we know this group are capable of, and that this head coach can get the team playing in that manner, rather than, we only have to go back to Hull, where it was aimless balls from centre-backs over the head or in and around the vicinity of Ashley Barnes, totally bypassing Núñez, totally bypassing Sara. That and this was night and day. So, kudos to everybody involved there today. But as I say, you've now proven again what you'd proven in August, that you can perform in that manner. It's all about consistency, and ultimately it's consistency that will separate this pack of, we'll say, 5 or 6 clubs into the 2 who actually make it and probably join the other 4 in the top 6.
Yeah, and I think also in terms of that point, which is, it's and actually you look at the league table just to pick up on that before today. If Norwich City would have lost this game, West Brom would have been 10 clear of them. I think that would have been insurmountable because from the evidence that we've seen this season, I guess there is an element to this of, will the real Norwich City please stand up, because we saw what we saw at the start of the season. We had that spell in the middle, and I guess it probably feeds the streaks element that we saw to it, and It has been really interesting, I think, Adam, the kind of change post Cardiff, because it's very clear, and I think Shane Duffy hinted at this after Hull, really, that at some point there was an intervention. Who led that? I don't know, whether that was David Wagner, whether that was the players, of something's got to give in terms of what they were doing defensively, because I remember being stood in the stand at Cardiff and saying this was a good win, but Norwich cannot keep relying on having to score 3 goals to win games of football. Since then, I think it's 8 goals that they've conceded now in 10 games. I mean, if you're looking at something that has kind of stabilised their season, if you want, and built this kind of foundation that they've got at the moment, it's that defensive footing that they've built. And actually, for the stuff that Paddy mentioned in the first half in terms of their possession and how much better they were at that, the second half was more dogged, it was more obdurate, and it was about then transitioning and being a threat then in transition and on the counter, as they did with what was an excellently crafted second goal. And that's why I think, Hull and in recent games, Southampton, it's felt maybe that the balance hasn't been there. It's been more geared towards pragmatism. This for the first time maybe felt like they got the perfect balance between what they needed to do in possession and on the ball and going forward and affecting games positively, offensively, to also having that kind of defensive solidity that we've seen. And I think maybe that underpins why there has been so much frustration, because everyone can see the quality, and we listed the names last week of the players that are in this Norwich City team. If you can unlock that, there's real talent in this group of players, as today documented.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to sort of the importance of Josh Sargent. We've already spoke about kind of the ability to bring them up the pitch, and as a player, he's so crucial to the system and what they're trying to do. I mean, you probably don't get Ashley Barnes making those runs in behind quite this, in the same fashion that Sargent does, to be able to bring the likes of Signs and Rowe into play. So that's crucial. But I mean, yeah, defensively they are so much better. I mean, today I think West Brom didn't even have a shot on target in the first half, and second half, other than kind of those couple of chances that fell to Swift, didn't really carve Norwich open in the same manner they did at, say, Plymouth or some of these really hideous away games we had to deal with, and the performances and sort of they just kind of sunk under the sort of pressure of teams, where today very dogged, very Duffy's in his element when teams are kind of throwing balls into the box. They've sort of tried to change that, I feel, a little bit. West Brom, when they brought DK on, it was more sort of aerial sort of crosses and looking for him, and that's sort of Duffy's game. We saw that at Hull, and yeah, I think if they can keep this defensive unit fit, and that's kind of the key. I think maybe that spell where they were poor, they had a lot of injuries as well. They kind of had to deal with the loss of a lot of them at different points. And yeah, moving forward, it is crucial that they keep that stability and the team remains fit, because this is the issue, that they are a team that, starting 11 wise, is up there with some of the best in the Championship. But as soon as you as most teams find, really, apart from the likes of Leicester or Southampton, if you lose players, that the quality between kind of your players in reserve and those in the starting 11 is quite vast, and that can make a telling difference. So hopefully, for David Wagner's sake and Norwich City's sake, these players can remain fit, and I think they've then given themselves a bit of a chance to hopefully mount what is going to be a really good second half of the season, and hopefully a push into the top 6.
Yeah, this feels to me today, and very different type of games, but a bit like the win at Millwall last season, when it felt maybe for the first time in a while that there was an opportunity ahead of them. And obviously last season they won 1 in 11, and the season petered out. But it is that kind of feeling again at the moment. It's, oh goodness me, that's the hope again, isn't it? And I think that's. And I remember we discussed this. I think it was after Bristol Rovers, about how that hadn't existed, and you create that through positive performances, because that's a way of creating sustainability. And I guess that probably leads me on to my next point, Paddy, where it has been, and you kind of touched upon it earlier, certainly since Cardiff, certainly since that autumn run, it's kind of felt like Norwich are a defeat from crisis. There's this and constantly, if there is a trip up and there is a defeat, that we come back to the same conversations about David Wagner, about Ben Napper, Stuart Webber as it was earlier in the season, the structural issues around the club. I know that maybe people who listen stroke watch from the club would say that those conversations only ever happen when Norwich City are losing games. I know people, I'm sure, who've been watching and listening for a while and have maybe disagreed with perhaps, I don't want to say negativity, but maybe how we viewed things and how other people have viewed things. And you touched upon it there. The football is very up and down, and at the moment is a very good result. And one swallow doesn't make a summer, as the saying goes. But and David Wagner touched upon it as well in some post-match interviews. It is a funny game, but I think, like you said, you can't really ignore what your eyes have seen for points of this season, and it's been very different teams that we've seen at different points. But in terms of that negativity aspect, the scenes that we saw at the end of today's game, for the first time, in goodness, I can't even tell you the last time scenes like that. We've seen obviously a few points where they've done the waves and stuff, but just in terms of pure noise and the way the supporters reacted, as I said earlier, it felt like a moment. And it's up to obviously Norwich and the players. They're still ultimately, despite all of these conversations, they're still not in the top six. They've still got ground to make up, but it's a step in the right direction. But it doesn't half help these run of forms, these what we've spoken about so far, when, as I said, it kind of felt like a club and has felt like a club for a long time that has just been teetering constantly on the edge of crisis and discontent.
Well, and we know why. I mean, ultimately, we don't need to, rake over AGM calls and comments and dissections of the previous sporting director's body of work. The overhang from is he going, when's he going, when's the new person coming in, when are they starting, how does that work? All of that in the background against the backdrop of this head coach presiding over mid-table mediocrity last season, albeit he came in halfway through and you could cut him a degree of slack, although it's worth pointing out that, as you say, after that whole Millwall win in early March, they were bang in it, and then they went 1 win in 11. So all of this feeling of frustration and disaffection and in the worst periods of this season, almost an apathetic disconnect, that's all a product or a byproduct of those processes, that the way this club, for many, they've felt has been rudderless for too many seasons now. And, that's all coalesced in when they don't particularly as well, in a roundabout way, the fact that they started the season so well, many would have hoped that all of that was in the past and that corner had been turned definitively and on we go now. And a positive uplifting season is ahead of us. And the fact that it regressed back again for 3 months or so, that probably just amplified those feelings and raked them back to the surface again. But I recall I wouldn't often quote him given his less than positive impact overall on Norwich City, but Dean Smith's sticking plasters and results comment that always sticks with me. That if you get positive results and you get positive performances, then everything else will be forgotten. And whatever issues people have or frustrations or grievances with individuals or collectively the direction of travel, you won't hear that. You won't hear that in periods where on the pitch, shop window, things look to be coming together. And that's why, it's so important that they have to continue this, because if not, to take your point, Connor, about the one defeat away from more kind of soul searching and introspection, I fear that is going to be the cycle we're in now. Because irrespective of what's happening in front of house, there's still issues that we know in terms of the boardroom dynamic, the shift there. What is Ben Napper's Norwich City blueprint and him communicating that down the track, and very difficult at the moment as he's trying to navigate a transfer window, but just the messaging that will need to come out in the months ahead to definitively signal a break from what Stuart Webber's era was all about. All of those processes will happen at their own speed, but what will happen if they continue to perform as they did today and the results continue to track in that direction is all of that will be given time and afforded space to develop more organically. They only become an issue when we're seeing what we're not seeing on the pitch, and then the frustration then is not only directed outward in terms of David Wagner and the coaching staff, but then inward about why aren't we hearing from certain individuals? What is this club trying to achieve? What's happening in terms of the shareholder mix? Why is it maybe not moving at a pace that supporters would like if results are not suggesting that this is a club in an upward trajectory? So it's just the soap opera that is any football club, I guess. It's not, Norwich are not immune to it. You can go round. Dare I say that you contrast where Norwich are now with a club like Reading, who've been in and around the Premier League, similar size club, you could argue, in terms of fan base and support and what their fans and anybody connected with Reading are having to deal with now. Everywhere you go, I guess there will be a sense that people want more from their club, whether it's on-pitch performance, off-pitch performance, and so why would Norwich be any immune from those processes? But the reality is the club's own stated ambition this season was to target the top six, and it's been repeated subsequently since by people who are shaping the direction of travel. That is the benchmark they will be judged by, and as a result, when they were mid-table and going backwards, I think everything that came their way is fully justified. I don't think there's any agenda or anybody's seeking to create a situation that isn't there. It's, as always, the discourse around the football club is shaped completely by what those inside the football club manage to achieve on the pitch and off the pitch. And if it's good, and it's been proven in recent years, when it's good, it's very good, and everybody gets fully on board with that, because ultimately, we've said this very often, I don't think anybody, whether it's what we do for a living or fans or anybody connected with Norwich in a sort of an actual capacity in terms of working for that football club, we all want the same thing, which
I mean, we're not anti-club.
We're far from anti-club. I mean, that's just one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But given where it was espoused, I'm not surprised. But yeah, because I mean, human nature tells you strip back what your involvement is or your connection is to that football club. Do you want to be part of something that's enjoyable and exciting and optimistic, or do you want something that's unyieldingly negative and frustrating and certainly doesn't take you away from your trials and tribulations in your own life, whatever they may be? You want escapism if you've got anything to do with a football club. And make no mistake, Norwich doing well is better for every constituency that is involved in Norwich City, and we certainly are part of that. So. But you have to call it as you see it. I mean, what other way could you dice up 7 defeats in 9 before Christmas, and a club which were listing in terms of mid-table, and it's testament to David Wagner and those players that they are clearly 2 defeats in 12 all competitions, addressing the issues that they had to. And to give him his due, what I will say with David Wagner, he is the first to come out and say, defensively, we need to tighten up there. That's not good enough. And in recent games now, work with the ball as well. Because they're all processes we've, ad nauseum talked about in these sort of forums. Fans, you can be sure, have talked about the same things. And I think, again, it feels like we're all more or less talking around the same subject matters. The only difference is they're the people who can do something about it. We can't do anything about it. So, what I will say is, if Norwich can get some wind in their sails, as has been proven in very recent times, but you could even maybe go back the last 15 years or so, when Norwich as a club can get something moving, and that can prove quite an unstoppable force. And let's all hope that that's where we're heading for the end of the season.
Yes, indeed, and and that sort of boils down to today, Adam. Really, to come back to it, because Carrow Road's been an unhappy place. There's been people who have felt at different points during the season that they haven't been able to turn up. We've seen lots of empty seats. I would say it was significantly fuller today in terms of bodies and bums on seats. It's been a place that has been quite quiet, quite angry at different points. It's been a place that at times this season, last season, in recent years, has vocally called for people to go. And look, one win, as I've said a few times, doesn't solve all of those issues. There were still, as David Wagner said, as we would probably admit ourselves, there were still flaws with what they did today and how they approached it. But as I said, it's the first time that I've kind of looked around Carrow Road as the final whistle has gone and seen people smiling, hugging. I saw a nice embrace between what I assume was a father and son. I don't know that at the end. And it, as Paddy said, it doesn't half help when, and there's been a few times where I felt, no one's ever said this to me, but I've just felt at points that maybe they've felt, oh, blimey, it feels like, we can't win, we get battered for doing kind of everything internally. That's kind of been felt. And it's like, well, it comes down to, as Paddy says, what you do off the pitch and how you speak to supporters, and what you do on the pitch and how you play. And when you play well, as they did today, and when you win in a way that they did today, people will get behind you naturally, because it is a place where everybody wants success. And as Paddy said, and we saw that under Daniel Farker, and we saw it under Alex Neil in the second half of the season, under Paul Lambert, under Nigel Worthington. When things are good here, they're really good.
I mean, Norwich fans' loyalty, even during tough times, is completely unquestionable. They're there through thick and thin, and they've had to deal with a lot of difficulty in the past sort of 2-3 seasons where this sort of club and the performances have been nowhere near good enough, for the standards they've set over the years. They've always been a club that's tried to challenge in the top six. They're a team that's been in the Premier League on numerous occasions, and I think it's probably fair to want your club to do more and be up there and where we know they can be and where they can compete with teams that maybe have come to Carrow Road in recent years and maybe played Norwich off the park. And it is that feeling of kind of community. It's going to Carrow Road for that escapism where maybe something's been difficult in a week and you just want to go to the football, see your team win, and it can maybe be that lift then for the next week. And I think today was probably the first time in a while where maybe a lot of fans have gone to Carrow Road and felt they've got something on the pitch that's
pride, isn't it?
Yeah, something to get behind, something to their team is showing that fighting mentality. They're performing, and it was exciting. There was moments that we spoke about, kind of the bits of play at points today, and you watch that, and that's the Norwich team that I've grown up always, watching, that kind of identity, the Norwich way almost, of playing an exciting brand of football and trying to score goals. And obviously that's maybe been difficult at different points of the season. There are sides that's maybe lacked that cutting edge and kind of gone away from that. We spoke kind of even about the whole performance. They won the game, but it wasn't a Norwich style of football in my eyes. So it felt today was the first time I've felt for a while it was that, and that's for me why the reaction they got was warranted. And seeing that post-match celebrations again, it felt good. It makes you feel good, and you kind of come onto these podcasts with way more optimism off the back of that than what you would have if they've lost the game 3-1 in the Blackburn style and everything's really negative, and justifiably so. So yeah, it's good, and long may that continue. Of course, I think they've got some really big home games coming up. Paddy's team coming down pretty soon, and some other big games. So yeah, long may it continue, and hopefully we'll get many more enjoyable Carrow Road afternoons for the rest of the season.
Here. In part 2 of the pod, we're going to touch a little bit on David Wagner, speak about transfers, and then look ahead to what is just a little bit of a big week for Norwich City. See you in a sec. Welcome back to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, brought to you by Coleman's of Norwich. We will, of course, have our Bring the Heat segment a little bit later on in the show. Again, I say that just to pre-warn the guy sat next to me more than anything else. Paddy, David Wagner, we've touched upon him at various points. I mean, you listed kind of the record now, 2 defeats in 12 games, 3 in 15, did you say, in all competitions, irrespective of what you think of performances and the way that they've gone about it. And I think today is, as I said, I think it's the best that they've performed, blimey, for a long, maybe even since that 4-0 win over Huddersfield in August. Where do you feel he is at, I guess, maybe in relation to, it's hard to answer because we don't have 26 supporters around, 26,000 supporters around us to really gauge it. But do you feel he is turning the dial now? Is it too early to say? Where do you feel where is the view? Where is the gauge on him and his position at Norwich City at this moment in time?
I mean, it probably flows into the previous discussion about this kind of, it's either triumph or disaster, and there's no in between. And whether that's the discussion of Norwich in general or David Wagner, that's my feeling is that, he backed himself into the tightest, and he said himself, I recall now, it just popped into my head, that in that 7 defeats in 9, when your back's, it was words to the effect, when your back's against the wall, there's only one place you can go, and that's to come out swinging. And, as he said also himself, every week for about 6 weeks, having to answer questions about his future, deflect questions about his future. That's out of my hands. I remember the Sunderland away defeat. That was a bad defeat. That was another one where they went so passive and even went in front that day, if you recall. But as soon as Sunderland equalised, there was only one winner. And It looked a bit like a rabble by the end, wasn't it? You know, you had Duffy and McLean, and that really wasn't working. And after that game, he did look a beaten man. I think I might have tweeted that at a point, and it was kind of, well, what happens to me now is out of my hands. And I think it was led to believe that there was a board discussion after that game, and
They were close.
They were, exactly, yeah. So, so a question about David Wagner's status now has to be filtered still through. It's not all that distant to go back to that Sunderland episode, and internally as much as externally, I'm sure it was being questioned, do we persist with this guy? But right now, it's very simple. He just has to continue in this vein now, and not just today, but 2 in 12 defeats is a very, very healthy body of work, and it also sells a line maybe if he can maintain that sort of cycle between now and the end of the season, that he is a streaky coach and that it is clumps of good interspersed with clumps of bad. And if we can get a bit more of an even keel in terms of the results between now and the end of the season, it might not be good enough in the final analysis to get into the top 6, or even if they got there to then progress out of the playoffs. But I think at least, what it will do, unquestionably in the short term, is we will no longer having to be devoting hours of airtime or reams of columns to David Wagner's future and what next. And that certainly isn't going to happen if he continues on in this vein. But and we've said even in those periods, I think we've all said, on a human level, in terms of connecting with the fan base, night and day between him and Dean Smith. He does get it. He does speak in a way that you want him to do well. You want to root for him on a personal level. He's never shied away from even in the tough periods. And so in terms of his standing, like you say, Connor, it's probably not for us to really opine about that, or where how many he's got in his corner and how many are still on the fence, or how many are still firmly in the Wagner out camp. But that reaction at the final whistle from the ones who were there tells you that he's on the path now to certainly not have to have his future dredged up and discussed and dissected on a seemingly game by game basis. And that's probably only thing you can say at this cycle. I think we'll have to roll it on a little bit longer, because as you say, around the corner is tough games against Leeds and Coventry, and then obviously maybe that's a free hit in the FA Cup, but you certainly wouldn't want the wheels to come off there and that have a detrimental impact going back into the league campaign. So there's a few. I think there's a bigger sample of work needed before anybody can make anything definitive about David Wagner and his status as Norwich's head coach.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're far too early in terms of saying he's definitively turned the corner and etc. etc. But he does deserve credit, Adam does, and this is the coaching team as well, because we spoke about it earlier. It's hard to argue with their defensive record, with the identification of a problem. You saw after Cardiff the goals conceded record, and yes, I recognise the expected goals against hasn't really shifted. They're still they still were prior to this game in the bottom 5 or 6 in the league for that. So it's still not perhaps where it needs to be, and there is a suggestion at the moment they're maybe slightly outperforming that, and we did see a little bit of that today with West Brom's finishing, which I thought was pretty poor at points. Paddy said a minute ago, that in-possession element to it, and we saw today there were good signs of that. We need to see it on a bit more of a consistent basis. But in terms of the identification of issues and I guess solving them to an extent, he has kind of, as Paddy said, navigated a period where it was 7 defeats in 9, and even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, there was conversations about his future and the holding pattern that Norwich City were in. It doesn't, at the moment, at this juncture, it can change very quickly. Football does, and they go and get a hide-in on Wednesday, and they go and get a hide-in at Liverpool, and they lose to Coventry, and no doubt we'll be sat here in a fortnight discussing it again. But at this moment in time, the best thing you can say about him is that those conversations aren't happening in the here and now, and from the position that he was in, he deserves credit for how he's navigated Norwich City through this sort of 2-month spell or so.
Yeah, I think even kind of that point where maybe they did turn the corner at Cardiff and the Bristol City win, a lot of that kind of aim towards him was maybe the rub of the green was there. That ball fell to Adam Eder in the 90th minute to get the win at Bristol City, and there's lots of other examples of that. Then you kind of had in that spell, the 0-0 against Preston that was just absolutely diabolical. And I think irrespective of kind of the results there, the performances weren't there, and therefore there was a lot of mitigation still around him and whether he was the man to drive it forwards. But if we continue to get like performance levels like today and results, and he gets Norwich in and around it, then he deserves huge credit for the way it's turned around. And one thing we've always said, is to deal with. He's a great on a human level. He's always been calm and collected, never really kind of been nasty or sort of batted back questions where other managers maybe in other clubs or previous Norwich managers maybe have had that kind of turn because of the amount of criticism that's on them, and that's probably natural. That's a natural human reaction. But David Wagner's very cool in the head almost, in that he didn't react like that. And he deserves huge credit. His coaching staff deserve huge credit, and the players as well deserve huge credit because they've obviously played a part in that. It's addressing those issues, and I think he's always been very vocal about after games. Paddy kind of mentioned it about the areas that weren't good enough, and I felt maybe for quite a sustained period there they weren't addressing those issues. Kind of the amount of goals they leaked at Plymouth, and there was lots of other examples then, sort of down the road where they were conceding similar goals and just very, very poor. But yeah, today for me was a huge turning point, and it felt like maybe a lot of those issues. There's still other issues that maybe do need to still be addressed, but the fact we're now starting to see that is hugely positive, and long may it continue.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. And look, these things are never black and white, and we know, and it's a case of they've won today, and you can't get too carried away with that. And the element is it's you got black and white, and I was going to say 50 Shades of Grey, but I think I maybe steer towards a different number. I don't know why that's coming in my head. That is completely a different podcast. But multiple shades of grey in between the two. I don't know. We ended up there. Paddy, let's move on to bring the heat, not that type of heat.
To romance.
Yeah, to romance and whatever else. Who brought the heat for you today from a Norwich City perspective in our segment with our wonderful sponsors? I would say as well as we always do, some excellent vintage Norwich City shirts. So thank you to Billy Pointer for those. He is a top man, and it's a brilliant range, and hopefully at some point we'll do something with him that can document the full collection, because there are some absolute corkers in there, and it takes up literally 2 rooms in his house. But anyway, Paddy, who brought the heat for you today? And I've given you enough filling time, hopefully.
Thanks, Connor.
Who are you going for?
I'm going for Ben Gibson today, because I turned to you after he made his umpteenth challenge coming out of. Interestingly, there was a very interesting tactical element there. He seemed to be notably
holding midfield.
Notably split from Duffy in certain parts of that game, and after another, I think it was Jed Wallace, he basically prevented him getting on the half turn, and the ball went out of play. I think I turned to you and said that I cannot remember him playing as well for such a long time in a Norwich shirt. And we know he's had his injury issues and one or two other things to contend with this season as well off the pitch, but that was very definitely for me Ben Gibson's one of his better games in a Norwich shirt, and he definitely brought the heat.
Speaking of bringing the heat, I see you've got your heated gilet on. Is this a new sponsorship you've got to tell us about?
Well, I've already paid. Well, no, I didn't. Santa already paid for this, so it's not going to help me unless they want to supply me with a lifetime supply of. But I won't work for the audio. I could show you the battery pack, and it really does the job. Yeah.
Is that not heavy?
No, not at all. No.
Is it not?
No, not really. No. This isn't working in audio form, but
No, it isn't.
more to the point, as you can see, I look like if I.
It's an interesting sort of inner lining. It's like
I nearly said I look like a DJ.
It looks like I
won't go there. With that.
Like one of those. What those like picnic bags that you can get with that inside.
Yeah, they retain the heat, don't they?
Yeah.
But I don't even know who the manufacturer is to give them a plug to.
Well, how would you rate it? Is it because I'm guessing this is your first heated gilet experience?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
are you hot on it, for want of a better phrase?
It's definitely bringing the heat. Let's put it that way. Yeah, but. I mean, you can get them. Obviously, my one is armless in that regard. So, I can't really speak for the armed version. But I certainly needed it at -6 at Bristol Rovers midweek, mate. Because by common consent, that's probably the coldest I've ever been in a football ground. Funny enough, I was talking to a couple of the photographers today and midweek, and I mean, if there is any warmth from being huddled in a press box as we were, is when you're exposed on a pitch side, it's. And they said that Paul, our ace photographer, said at one point in the second half he he couldn't move his fingers to press the button shutter on his camera. It was that cold. So, yeah, we definitely needed the Gilet that night, and it was up full volume, mate. So, yeah, no. If you're ever out in an outside pursuit work-wise in this time of the year, then I don't even know why I'm selling
I'm
Gilets.
waiting for you.
Making a penny in
I was
commission.
going to say, I'm waiting for the, if you enter the code Paddy Davitt or something, you get a discount.
Yeah. Either that or a copy of 50 Shades of Grey, maybe. Yeah. No. Yeah, no. It's to answer your long-winded answer is yes. I'm very happy with it. Thank you, Santa.
Good. There we go. I think that's one that Gary Neville champions, isn't it? Fairly regularly. I don't know if he's got a stake in the business. Not as much of a stake as you seem to have. Anyway, Adam, who bought the heat for you?
I'm going to go with Dimi Yanulis. I think there's been a few kind of debates amongst fans. Sam McCallum's been consistently a lot better than maybe he has been for quite a while over the Christmas period. There was lots of good performances. I think, the likes of second half against Ipswich and plenty of other sort of periods of games where he's played well. But I thought Dimi today, the assist for Johnny Rowe's goal, of course, he probably should have done slightly better with an effort that fell to him in the first half. He blazed quite high over the crossbar, but I think he was quite crucial today, kind of when they were building up in getting them further forward at that sort of spell. I think on about the 30th minute there that Paddy spoke about, he was quite a key component in that build-up. So I think given kind of the debate between him and McCallum who should start, I think he kind of reaffirmed today that he is probably the one who's leading the charge in that position.
And I will go for Josh Sargent for the reasons that we spoke about, just in terms of his pressing and the threat that he offers them in behind, and just how different he makes this Norwich City side. I think I said it on a podcast. I was a little bit not wary, but maybe concerned that perhaps what we'd seen at the start of the season was a purple patch, and I don't think we are seeing that. I think what does concern me is it's interesting if you listen to any kind of Premier League managers or speak to any sort of scouting analytical people, and they will tell you kind of how dry the pool of number nines is at the moment in world football. Recruiting one is really difficult. You look at, for example, the issues that Sunderland are having, maybe even Ipswich, in terms of trying to find a replacement for George Hurst. But certainly at Premier League level, there's a real kind of lack of physical, complete number nines, and he really is that. And you do wonder if he does get himself on a run and Norwich City are unable to, obviously, they're going to go to Wembley and win the whole thing, obviously. But if they don't do that, I think there might be a conversation that a Premier League club would like to have around Josh Sargent at some point. So yeah, I'm going to go for him. Speaking of that situation, Paddy, and we're legally not obliged to say John Rowe's name until February the 1st anymore. New rule on the podcast, so there you go. But in terms of incoming business, because there's been a lot of talk about this from Norwich fans, no business thus far, not really any kind of sniff of any type of business thus far. What do you make of it? Because it is the 20th of January, so 11 days... Is it 11 days left in the window? It is the 31st, and not one of these weird ones that close on the 1st. 11, 12 days left of the window, so I leave myself a bit of legroom. What do you make of it? Because it's been quiet. We had those quotes from David Wagner right at the start about how excited he was, about how different the team would look, and that hasn't come to surface so far. What do you make of the transfer window and where Norwich City are at?
No, I mean, I've seen those predictably sort of surface again in recent days, but reality is, I think we're where we expected them to be, because the messaging was effectively that it's a pruning job, and then you've started to see that process with Forshaw, and we might get into a certain Polish international in a follow-up question, but basically trying to move on players, and then the other thing was, and you've seen ample evidence of that, is Football League loans for their best and their brightest who aren't already out with a view to next season. It all feels very much holding pattern, and obviously the finances play into that. And maybe when things were looking pretty bad for David Wagner, the whole uncertainty potentially, maybe certainly externally anyway, it felt around his position. Maybe that was a factor, but this is exactly where I would have expected Norwich to be going into 11 days left. That if they do anything, and I think that was reinforced today post-match, David's quotes.
Sorry to jump in, but I mean, just tell us a little bit about what you thought about that, because you asked him a question about Przemysław Poeta, which I think we'll come back to on a different point. But yeah, the kind of manner that he answered it was quite interesting.
Well, yeah, it was essentially, my question was, as we've seen with Adam Forshaw, that a senior player there who isn't making even matchday squads, let alone getting minutes that would constitute regular game time, and they decided clearly, to the benefit of all parties, with the financial consideration, that they get his wages off the wage bill. Off he went and signs for Plymouth and plays today, and Plymouth wins, so it's gone well for him this weekend. But effectively, you've done that with Forshaw. Is now Puerta pretty much orbiting the same, because he's in the same contractual situation. He's out of contract at the end of this season. Again today, David confirmed there was no fitness issue. He simply didn't make the 20. It was the same at Bristol in midweek. So is it logical to assume we could have a scenario in the next 10, 11 days, if the planets aligned, that we would see Puerta go out the door? And his answer was along the lines of, to paraphrase, well, I've kind of said to Ben that we have to be careful about the numbers, which was his answer to me earlier in this week, when I kind of hypothetically put that scenario to him about if you've got senior players coming to you saying, look, I'm not getting a look in here, I'd rather move on. And if
I'm out of contract,
yeah, exactly, yeah. And his answer earlier in the week was almost a reprise of the answer he gave tonight, which was, look, it looks healthy now in terms of the numbers, but things can change in a game or two, and he doesn't, as a head coach, and it's understandable, he doesn't want to be left short when we move from this window into February, because that's what he's got to go with. And he's probably wants a little bit of extra insurance in terms of the bodies he's got, and I'm sure, reading between the lines, he'd like maybe an addition or two, but to supplement the group. But I don't get that sense, and it felt almost in that answer tonight that, if they're not, I think he did add actually further on that, unless we're going to do one or we're going to bring one in, then it makes no sense to lose anybody else. So you would think that probably indicates that at best they'll be looking at something loan-wise maybe, and at worst it'll probably be as you were in terms of the bodies they've got now, and that'll be it moving forward.
Yeah, I wrote a column on this, went up on the Saturday morning, and I do think if the objective is down the track, irrespective of how it looks like that there's a reset on the horizon, it would feel a little bit short-sighted to then bring someone in, even a loan, when that finance can be directed towards maybe something a little bit more in the summer. And is it really worth chasing something? And I think, as we've seen today, Norwich have a squad that kind of feels like it's good enough to certainly compete for the top six. Whether you could argue, a signing or two would push them in it is maybe a different debate to be had. I think for me, unless there was a situation maybe like they had, I can't remember what January it is, maybe, was it 16 when they signed James Maddison? When that opportunity popped up, and you can do that and it's beneficial in the long term. I think if there was something that popped up like that and it made sense, then I think that is maybe where they're at. I think if something pops up loan wise, then perhaps they will do it. We'll have to see. Adam, I think we're all mourning the loss of Adam Forshaw, mainstay in Norwich. I'm jesting, of course, and I'm sure he's a great guy. Probably made sense for all parties, didn't it? Just one that never really quite worked. I think it was 6 championship appearances in the end. Wasn't getting game time by the end. Wasn't making match day squads. I do wonder in my head if in years to come he will be not the poster boy for last summer's recruitment, but the thrust of kind of it in terms of the experience route that they went down. Just didn't work, that one, did it?
No, funny enough, I got a message yesterday off...
not Adam Forshaw, was it?
Not Adam Forshaw, no, but a Plymouth podcast asking me to come on and share some views. I said, honestly, don't ask me, because I've got no memories of him at all.
What was your... okay, yeah, I was going to ask you what your best moment was, but you can't think of one.
There was one good pass in the Bristol Rovers game the other week.
That was good, yeah. Paddy, best Adam Forshaw moment?
No, I can't. I've genuinely not been disrespectful to the lad. Did he do anything?
Well, he looked like... I saw him before the game at Plymouth because of where we had to walk past. He was ironically in conversation with, is it Neil Dewsnip, who he knows well from Everton, and he had what looked like a very good cup of tea that he'd made. Nice strength to that. So that's all I've got, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's just has not worked for any party, and it's best to get him off the books. You can imagine he's on an okay wage here. He's come from Leeds, who were in the Premier League last season, and it maybe felt like at that point in the transfer window, Norwich maybe did need that extra addition in the midfield, sort of maybe just from a defensive point of view to add to the squad. But the reality is, based on the system that David Wagner plays, he doesn't really need a player like that. They tend to be more technical midfielders, and you then got Kenny, who's sort of more got that ability to pass, and obviously defensively slightly more able to do it than someone like Gabriel Sara. So he's just not a player who's required, unfortunately, and the questions around kind of the age of him as well and his fitness will all come back. Norwich have that window. That's where a lot of these players are at, and it almost feels a little bit kind of Stuart Webber first summer window when he arrived, kind of the Marley Watkins, the Ben Marshalls, players that just never done it for Norwich and never really went on to do it anywhere else, unfortunately. So best of luck to them at Plymouth. I know they won today, so I think maybe for them, a younger squad, they've got lots like Whitaker, Mumba, they obviously have lost a few key players as well in the midfield. Kundal and Zaz has gone to Middlesbrough, probably a key player in terms of leadership and sort of a man who's been around the block in the Championship and the Premier League that can maybe drive them forward in sort of achieving their aims at the end of the season, which of course will be survival in this division. So fingers crossed for him. He can keep himself fit and he can play a crucial role for the Green Army and keep them in the Championship.
Absolutely. It felt a weird move at the time, and I think so it's transpired. I wanted a quick word because I don't think we're going to get much time, if any time, really, to talk about it. But an excellent win for the under-21s on Friday night, a 4-2 win. They were 2-0 down, came back to win that game. A double from Kennebo. Elliot Miles scored. Errol Mundle-Smith, that's the one, scored as well. Although I think there's a little bit of debate over whether the free kick that Gabriel Forsyth took had crossed the line before he nodded it in, but we'll give it to him. Elliot Miles, I think, is turning is his 17th birthday. So happy birthday, Elliot! If you happen to, I don't know why you'd be watching, but if you're watching, but that's a contractual situation that Norwich needs to get sorted. Kennebo as well, 13th goal of the season. Be good, but I think it's probably going to be difficult to get him on a new contract. He's had a contract in the summer as well. Would feel a bit of a shame if, similarly to Alex Matos, Norwich lost Kennebo and the talent that he's got. It's long been said to me for a period of time that those two really were the shining lights of Norwich City's academy. To lose them both for nothing, I know they've got a sell on Matos and whatnot. That would feel like a real shame. So hopefully there's something that can get sorted there, because the boy's clearly got talent to score the amount of goals and goal contributions that he has this season. So well done to them. They're in the knockouts. I think they've got a final group game against Bournemouth, and then they'll find out who they get in the last 16, I think it is. So good stuff for Alan Nielsen and his side. Paddy, Leeds United, Daniel Farker marching on together Wednesday. It's if even in the form that Norwich are in, it feels quite a daunting test. They've not been beaten at Elland Road so far this season. Been a little bit hit and miss. Really, really exciting attack. We all know what Daniel Farker can do at this level, but I think where Norwich City are right now, there's probably an element of bring it on about it, isn't there?
Oh, there will be now. Yeah, I mean, am I right in saying they're playing Sunday? We're recording Saturday night, obviously. Yes. So depending on how that goes. I mean, that was a stormer of a game at Carrow Road, wasn't it? And Norwich, I'm sure, will be focusing on the part that was the 2-0 up rather than what happened thereafter when the wheels came off. But I think it's a good one to get their teeth into now. And as we said right at the start, the fact that they've banked 3 points today, you go there. I mean, you get a point there. That's a great result, I think, given how strong they are at Elland Road. My fear is obviously that they'll see that Southampton have overhauled, Ipswich, subject to Ipswich obviously playing Monday night against Leicester, and they'll probably realise that they need to deal in wins rather than draws. So, it's always a great place to go. I mean, they make a right old racket, don't they, there? And Norwich had with Farker in the helm, as we know, had that memorable win on the way to the first title win. So, it's got all the elements to make it another unmissable watch. So, I think after today, we have to finish on a positive note. And if they continue in the same vein, then I think they're more than capable of going to Elland Road and getting a result. It is,
Adam. I've got the record in front of me here at Elland Road. 13 played, 9 wins, 4 draws, no defeats, 29 goals scored, 10 goals against, 31 points. And of course, this is before they play. Preston could go and beat them tomorrow, and it renders this complete conversation useless. But it's going to be really difficult for Norwich, isn't it? But as Paddy said, there a real opportunity ahead of them to, I guess, continue what they've been building over the last few weeks, and as we've seen in recent weeks as well with Southampton and Hull and West Brom today, they have proven that they can get points off teams above them.
Yeah, and I kind of go to that Ipswich game. They had only lost one game at Portman Road all season, and everyone kind of thought it was a foregone conclusion that Ipswich were going to get this long-awaited win over Norwich. And
Did they not do that?
I think it was 14 years, someone told me the other day. But yeah, it all boils back to the point of this team's done it this season. They've gone to grounds where there is these records, and they maybe turned up and not necessarily got rid of these. Even Ipswich didn't beat them, but they didn't lose there, and I think they've got to almost harness that and take that to Leeds on Wednesday night, and just perform. If they perform like they did today and they give them a really good go, I think even if Norwich do, get it well, the performance is crucial really. If they don't get the result, I think fans will get behind and say, look, we went toe to toe with arguably one of the best teams in the division, particularly given their home record as well, where you go there and you maybe get more similar performance levels of what we've had at Millwall or West Brom. Then I think this performance and this result today almost gets a little bit forgotten again. So it is a huge game. It's a big opportunity. And I just hope they go there and attack it. And if they come out with something like, even a point, as Paddy said, that would be a huge result for them, particularly then moving into some more favourable games, maybe after that big FA Cup game at Anfield. So, yeah, let's go and enjoy it. And hopefully Norwich perform to the levels we know they can.
Which feels like an apt place to end the podcast. Leeds and Liverpool, what a week that is for Norwich City. 3 words, bring it on. Thanks for watching, listening. See you soon.